Well, Obama promised during his campaign that he would create this office. He has made a commitment to carrying out his campaign promises. This was a major campaign promise. He's locked into it now.
This is Faith Complex, a dialogue about the entanglement of religion, politics and art, hosted by Professor Jacques Berliner-Blau of Georgetown University.
Hello, I'm Jacques Berliner-Blau of Georgetown University, and you've just clicked into Faith Complex. Joining us today is the religion reporter of the Washington Post, Ms. Jackie Salmon. Ms. Salmon, welcome to Faith Complex.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
You're kind of the representative of a new subspecies of journalist, the faith and values reporter or the religion and politics reporter. How did you come to this particular type of journalistic reporting?
3 years ago, I joined in covering religion at a really interesting time. The intersection of faith and politics was really changing.
So it seems that you religion reporters have so much to cover. In the last 4 years, we've had Pastor Hagee and Larry Craig and Mike Huckabee subsuming the Constitution to the Bible and so much more. But I think the grandmama of all stories is this Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, which the Obama administration is re-upping. Tell us a little bit about the somewhat lengthy genealogy of the Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships.
Well, as you know, Jacques, there have always been religious organizations that have gotten federal contracts, Catholic Charities, Jewish Family Services, but they've always been very secular. What happened was actually the Office of Faith-Based Initiatives has its genesis in the Clinton administration with welfare reform. There was a provision in there called charitable choice that really broadened the field for faith-based organizations, and it allowed them to maintain their religiosity, to retain religious symbols in the areas where they were holding programs, and most importantly, it allowed them to hire only people of their own faith if they wanted to do that.
All right, and then in 2000, 2001, the Bush administration sweeps into Washington, and it gets even grander.
9 days after his inauguration, Bush signs an executive order creating the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives.
So it was clearly a priority for him. This was something on his mind, something he gave like 60 speeches on it in the span of 2 months prior to 9/11.
Huge priority for him. This is something he'd carried out in Texas and brought now to the federal government.
Was this, among other things, a form of political payback to the Christian right that had helped him achieve that office in 2000?
Critics like to say it is. I mean, the Democrats were really deeply suspicious of this. Ironically, conservative evangelical Christians were suspicious of it. Some of them were suspicious of it too. They saw it as a way for the federal government to intervene more in religion.
But let's go back to the Bush administration. What would you say were some of the great accomplishments of his Office of Faith-Based Initiatives?
The accomplishments were a little ephemeral. It did increase awareness for religious organizations that there were these opportunities. It also spurred states and cities to create their own faith-based office. 36 governors and more than 100 cities created faith-based offices.
So this, in fact, is a tremendous accomplishment that they managed to do this in allegedly secular America. What were some of the setbacks?
There were plenty of setbacks. First of all, Bush was never able legislatively to accomplish anything. He could really not get any of this program into law, which meant, of course, the next president coming in could, with a stroke of a pen, sweep it away. There were lots of complaints, as we talked about, that this office was being used to steer contracts, lucrative contracts, to his supporters. And thirdly, there's a lot of doubt about whether it really achieved what it set out to achieve.
A book that I've always enjoyed, I know you know this book very well, is David Quo's Tempting Faith. And this was an actual Bushie who admired and worshipped George W. Bush, who joined the Office of Faith-Based Initiatives, and you tell us how the story ends.
Well, what happened was David became very disillusioned, and he decided that this office just was a sham. He said that the office was being used basically as a sop to keep Christian conservatives on board with the Bush administration. He said it was a purely political vehicle, and that he said that the Bush officials were calling Christian leaders nuts and kooks.
All right, so let's fast forward to April 2008. Then Senator Obama stuns the press corps. I believe this was in Zanesville, Ohio, where he says, not only am I not going to get rid of the Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives, I might even keep it and expand it. So why were we all so stunned by that? Let's start there.
Well, he was a Democrat, and Democrats are supposed to be secular. Plus, Democrats had a real skepticism of this office. They really saw it as a way for Bush to steer contracts, lucrative contracts, to his supporters, and they just didn't see the need for it.
But it was actually very shrewd of him, was it not?
Very shrewd. It was a way for him to shift to the center, appeal to those valued voters, and hopefully pick up some support among moderate evangelicals and mainstream Catholics.
And we know, in fact, that he did that. He flipped around the Catholic vote. He won it, whereas John Kerry, who was Catholic, lost it. And we also know that in crucial swing states, Ohio, North Carolina, Indiana, he was pulling maybe 5% or more of the evangelical vote back onto the blue side of the ledger. So it looks like he pulled that off.
It was a tangible way of showing his religiosity to Americans, to some of those evangelicals. He was never going to pick up the hard right, but to some of those more moderate evangelicals who were on the fence, and who were deeply unhappy with the Bush administration and looking to Obama.
Now, on February 5th, 2009, he signs the amendment to Executive Order 13199. It was originally signed on January 29th, 2001. By George Bush. All right, this brings into being what is now called the Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. So maybe you can do a little comparison for us. All right, what is the same and what is different when we compare the Obama 2.0 version to the George Bush 1.0 version?
Well, amazingly, when you think about it, with a Democratic administration, the mandate has been expanded under Obama. Some things are the same. For example, the idea is to help religious organizations get contracts. The difference is there is, at least so far as we can tell, some kind of policy making or at least policy influencing role for the Obama office that did not exist under Bush.
No.
Yeah, the Obama office is under the domestic policy office, whereas under Bush, the office was under the political office, under Rove. Yeah,
I don't think a lot of people have actually noticed that, and I think that there's been a certain degree of deflection or moving people away from recognizing that this actually has a policy generating capacity which it did not have during the Bush administration. There's one other difference, which I'm sure you're very well aware of, is this 25-person advisory council. Who's on this 25-person advisory council?
It's a real mix of secular and religious folks. Everyone from Larry Snyder, who heads Catholic Charities, to Jim Wallace, who's arguably the leader of the evangelical left, to the president of the Boys and Girls Club. It's a real mix of Frank Page, who's a former president of the Southern Baptist Convention, really runs the gamut, although you're not seeing, for example, representatives of the Family Research Council or Focus on the Family. He wasn't able to pick up that end of the equation, but